The obsidian glass of the throne room felt like a frozen lake beneath Kaelin's boots. Her father, the autarch, didn't look at her. He looked through her, toward the primitive soldier standing in the center of the hall. "Take her," Silas commanded, his voice a dry rattle. "Save our blood with yours, or let us both burn." The galaxy is full of ancient empires, but none so desperate as one that has forgotten how to grow. If you want to see how far a princess will go to save a dying race, subscribe and witness the union that changed everything. Now, the story of the Athelian fall begins. 6 weeks earlier, the only thing dying in the palace was the bioluminescent moss in Kaelin's garden. She had spent the morning scrubbing the gray, calcified edges of the planter, wondering if her own internal dryness was a reflection of the world outside. The Athelians were a masterpiece of evolution, refined over 1,000,000 years into something so pure it had become brittle. They were beautiful, silver-skinned, and utterly stagnant. The summons to the glass throne room came while she was still wearing the dirt of the garden on her fingertips. When she arrived, she found her father standing beside a man who looked like he had been forged from iron and sun-scorched earth. This was Captain Elias of Terra. He was short, stocky, and lacked the ethereal grace of her people, but the way he occupied space made the Athelian guards look like glass statues. Silas didn't offer a greeting. He spoke of genetic dead ends and the Terran adaptability that was now their only currency. Kaelin realized with a sickening jolt that she wasn't being asked to lead a diplomatic mission. She was the mission. The autarch was trading his only daughter for a chance to restart the Athelian heart. "I am a soldier, not a stud," Elias said, his voice a gravelly contrast to the melodic tones of the court. "You are a match," Silas countered, waving a hand toward a holographic display of interlocking double helixes. "Your species thrives in filth and chaos. We need that chaos." The wedding was a silent, suffocating affair. Kaelin wore a veil of woven light that felt like a shroud. They were moved to private chambers within the hour, the heavy obsidian doors sealing them into a shared life that felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. For the first few nights, they stayed on opposite sides of the room. Kaelin watched him from the shadows of her bed, noting the way he checked the door locks every evening, a rhythmic, paranoid habit, which meant he didn't trust the palace any more than she did. One evening, Elias sat at the small stone table and slid a data pad toward her. It contained Terran medical files, blunt and unpoetic. He pointed to a highlighted section. "My people aren't refined, Kaelin, but we survive. The scans say our chemistry, it works. You aren't barren. You're just waiting for a catalyst." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers. He didn't touch her, but she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, a biological furnace she didn't understand. Survival isn't always about the strongest. It's about who can change the fastest. Join us as we explore the friction between a perfect past and a messy future. Kaelin finally placed her hand over his. His skin was rough, scarred from years of service, a stark contrast to the smooth, untouched surface of her own palm. Over the following weeks, the silence between them began to fracture. He told her of Terra's oceans. She showed him the hidden mathematics of Athelian poetry. The transaction was dissolving, replaced by a slow, simmering curiosity that neither was prepared for. The friction between them had become a different kind of heat. It wasn't the sterile, calculated match the autarch had envisioned, but something jagged and real. In the quiet of their shared chambers, Kaelin watched Elias sleep. His breathing was heavy, rhythmic, a constant reminder of the alien vitality now tethered to her own, which meant the change was already irreversible. The medical scans confirmed it 3 weeks later. The holographic interface shimmered with a new, pulsing light, a hybrid heartbeat, faster than an Athelian's, steadier than a human's. It was the miracle the Empire demanded, yet the moment it was verified, the air in the palace grew cold. The Pureblood Syndicate, led by Duke Corbin, didn't see a savior in the image. They saw an infection. To them, the survival of the species was secondary to the preservation of its silhouette. Kaelin felt the shift in the servants' eyes. They no longer looked at her with pity, but with a sharp, glittering resentment. She began to keep a small, silver-handled gardening trowel under her pillow, the same one she had used to scrape the dying moss. It was a blunt, domestic tool, but in a palace of glass, even a bit of steel felt like power. "They won't let this happen," Elias whispered one night, his hand resting on the slight curve of her stomach. "My ship is 3 days out. We could leave." "If I leave, my people die," Kaelin replied. "If I stay, they might kill us both. But this child, she is the only bridge left." The transition from a political pawn to a protector happened in a heartbeat. While Elias was summoned to a grueling trade council, a distraction she now realized was orchestrated, the shadows in her room moved. Lyra, her own handmaid and a silent devotee of the syndicate, stepped from the hangings. She didn't offer a prayer or a plea. She held a thin, ceremonial blade designed for purification. The princess didn't scream. She didn't wait for the guards who would never come. As Lyra lunged, Kaelin pivoted, the grace of her lineage finally finding a violent purpose. She drove the silver trowel upward, the metal biting into the handmaid's wrist. The ceremonial blade clattered to the floor. Kaelin didn't hesitate. She stepped into the girl's space, mirroring the aggressive momentum Elias had shown her during their weeks together. She was no longer a barren princess. She was a mother. When Elias kicked the door and moments later, his sidearm drawn, he didn't find a victim. He found Kaelin standing over the slumped form of the assassin, her knuckles split, her breathing shallow but even. The silver trowel was slick with ethylene ichor. "I've got you," Elias breathed, reaching for her. "No," Kaelin said, looking toward the open balcony where the lights of the capital flickered. "I've got us." The autarch moved with a swiftness that surprised even the syndicate. With the evidence of the attempt on his grandchild's life, he finally had the leverage to purge the court. Duke Corbin and his zealots were dragged into the public plaza. There was no trial, only the cold finality of an empire choosing to prune its own rotting branches so the new graft could take hold. The labor was a war of its own. It took 30 hours, a frantic collaboration of Terran surgeons and ethylene healers. They spoke in different units of measurement, argued over blood pressure and soul residue, but they worked. When the child finally cried, the sound was a jagged, beautiful noise that echoed through the obsidian halls. They named her Aurora. She had her father's copper-toned skin and her mother's luminous, silver eyes. She was the chaos the autarch had asked for, and the devotion Kaelin had never expected to find. 20 years later, the garden was no longer dying. It was overgrown, a riot of Terran wildflowers and ethylene moss. Kaelin stood at the balcony, watching a sleek diplomatic vessel ignite its engines. On board was Aurora, heading for Terra. She wasn't just a princess. She was an envoy for a new kind of existence. Kaelin looked down at her hands, still calloused from years of tending to the growth. On the stone railing sat the silver trowel, now polished and worn smooth, its purpose transformed from a tool of survival back into a tool of life. The galaxy is a vast, cold place, but it warms up when we stop trying to stay the same. Does a species deserve to survive if it refuses to change? We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from the edge of the stars.